Chapter 1. My parents kidnapped me when I was a baby.
Before I tell you about the present, I ought to tell you about the past. You see, this horrible information has lent weight to what was already one of the most terrifying events from my childhood. My entire life, I've felt keenly observed. Some claim there to be no scientific basis for that sensation. The feeling of a gaze, or many gazes, touching one's skin. They claim it to be an illusion. As a child, I used to tell myself this, whenever I felt eyes upon me. But now I know better. In year 9, Miss Black arrived at our school and became, for only one lesson, the new religious education teacher. She spent 45 minutes mystified by me. That wasn't in my head, my friends commented as much. Her eyes lingered on my face, even when I wasn't answering a question. It made me squirm. "Are you a Christian?" one girl asked the teacher. "Religious persecution is part of the human condition, so I keep my beliefs close to my chest," Miss Black replied. Gaze locked on me, not the inquirer. "Ripe." "What did you say, miss?" asked another of my classmates. The teacher ignored him and continued with the lesson, but we all heard that out-of-place word. My friends repeated it mercilessly for the rest of the day. They joshed me with smooching noises and puckered lips, all while refusing to take their own eyes off me, emulating my supposed admirer. I am grateful for that, however. Grateful for their steadfast mockery. Grateful that they clung to my side so adoringly as we walked to the buses at the end of the school day. You see, if my friends hadn't been there to scream for help when Miss Black attempted to pack me into her rusted Kia, perhaps Mr. Alton wouldn't have rushed forwards in time. Perhaps I never would have been seen again. For many years, I woke in a sweat whenever recalling the many elements of that traumatic ordeal, which culminated in Mr. Alton shoving Miss Black to the asphalt and rescuing me from the back seat. I remember Miss Black's firm fingers clamping around the shoulder pads of my school blazer. I remember the putrid aroma of onions, cheese, and spices, meals woven into the leather chairs of her car. I remember the stained pillow and the scratchy blanket, suggesting that she'd been living in there. I shuddered whenever I imagined what that would-be abductor had in store for me. But I may not have been frightened enough. Miss Black was arrested, and my parents moved us to the other side of the country. However, even with that dangerous woman locked away, my fear of being watched only worsened. A doctor prescribed antidepressants to help with my phobia of being watched. Sure, those pills helped to dull the fear, helped to dull all of my emotions, rendering me a numb adolescent, near oblivious to the world around me. But they were still there, the eyes of the watchers. I just cared significantly less about them. Until this weekend. I came home from university to help Dad with some spring cleaning, as he'd been complaining about clutter in the house, though it ended up being a matter of spring reshuffling, as things were simply being moved into the loft until my parents had the mental energy to decide what to do with them. My father was quite particular about the tidying process, repeatedly telling me to stick to my side. I'd never been allowed in the attic as a child, and I hardly seemed welcome there as an adult, but Mom had apparently forced him to ask me for help. His back was playing up, so he'd been struggling to carry boxes on his own. Anyhow, I insisted that I would follow Dad's rules, which made him soften a little. He conceded that I'd never disobeyed him before, so he'd trust me. And then came the second most frightening situation of my young life. Whilst we were moving clutter into the loft, my father clutched his chest with fingers bent angularly. "Dad?" I gasped. Most oddly of all, my father, legs buckling, seemed concerned only with the cardboard boxes at the side of the room. He tried to shove one in particular off the top of the stack, but both the box tower and his brittle body came tumbling down to the floorboards. I dropped to my knees beside him, then twisted my head to the open attic door. "Mum, help!" A few seconds later, my mother, calling out for an explanation, came flying up the attic ladder. She wailed in horror at the sight of her husband lying half-conscious on the attic floor. Mum hurriedly rang 999. Then beckoned me towards her. "Come on, Charlie, get out of the attic." I frowned, eyeing Dad below me. "What? One of us needs to stay with him." "Charlie, I won't tell you," Mum began, then a voice came from her phone, and she started to descend the ladder. "Yes, it's my husband, he's—" As she talked to the operator, I found myself focusing on something other than the man lying at my knees, teetering on the precipice of a cardiac arrest. Rather, I was focusing on my parents' odd behavior. Dad had knocked the boxes over intentionally. Mum hadn't wanted me to stay in the attic. Something was up. "Charlie," Dad wheezed after I'd climbed to my feet and walked towards the toppled box, with a sealed lid, that he'd been trying to hide. I held up a hand. "Don't move. Mum's calling an ambulance." "Don't," he croaked, exerting whatever strength he had left. But every protest only motivated me further. I knelt before the unlabeled box, held together with sellotape robbed of adhesiveness by time, then I tore the flaps open with ease. Inside were discolored sheets of paper, coated in orange, mildew, mold, and ink. The sheets were made of fibers that felt like painful bristles to the touch, as if they might draw blood, or burrow beneath my flesh. A horrifyingly inexplicable sensation that, now, I do not believe to have been imaginary. Those handwritten documents told a story that sickened me. Adam Darren. October 2, 2005. Blessed be. 11 pounds. Blessed be. Adam smiles for the crescent moon. He is ripe for harvest. Blessed be. He shall end the world of men. He shall lead the chosen few. Blessed be. The poetic ramblings meant little to me, but the date of birth certainly didn't. The 10th of February, 2005. My birthday. My father painfully pleaded, "Don't touch them, please." I found an old Polaroid at the bottom of the box, displaying dozens of people standing in a field on a sunny day. A timid moon hung above, half hidden by the blue of the sky. There was nothing immediately odd about the people. They wore ordinary clothes, denims and cottons. At the front, a blonde-haired couple held a blue bundle between them, a towel cushioning a newborn baby, his cherub face peeking out. And a few feet to the side of them, wearing smiles tinged with falseness and fear, were two adults that caught my eye, 20 years younger, but instantly recognizable. Mom and Dad. "Stop touching them, Charlie," Dad begged, and I turned to see him reaching towards me painfully. "They'll have found us by now. The ambulance is on its way," Mom called as she hurried back up the attic ladder, and when she saw the relics in my hands, her eyes widened. In a demanding tone, I asked her, "What are these?" "You touched them," she whispered, eyes flitting to the attic window fearfully. "Who is this child?" I growled, jabbing at the picture. "Why are you and Dad in this picture?" "We should have burnt that box," Mom whimpered as she walked over to me. "Maybe it's not too late." "No," Dad weakly protested, choking on the word. Mom knelt beside him and took his hand. "The operator said we need to get you into a comfortable." "Don't destroy any of it," Dad pleaded, ignoring his wife's pleas. "That'll only make it worse. We have to run. We have to." "Are these my real parents?" I interrupted, cheeks red with rage, pointing at the baby in the photo. "Am I Adam?" My mom averted my gaze, answering me without saying a word. As my fingers gripped the Polaroid's plastic coating, I heard voices pouring out of the picture, jubilant voices. Though nothing about their joy put me at ease, it haunted me. Haunted me because it felt as if I were bound to a force, both internal and external, unlike any earthly thing I have ever experienced. Horrified by this sensation, I dropped the contents of the box, and my parents let out a collective sigh of relief. But then my free-willed feet carried the rest of my body over to the attic window. Standing at the other side of the road was a man in a parka. Just a man, an ordinary man. But he was eyeballing me, looking straight up at the window. He mouthed a word at me. I don't know how to read lips, but I'm certain of what he said. "Ripe." He began to sprint towards our front door. A shoe sole pummeled against the front door 2 floors below, and my questions no longer mattered. All that mattered was the very primitive and pressing urge in my head to escape, to survive. And, upon hearing the sound of the intruder, my parents shared a knowing look, before screaming in unison, "Run!" Terrified beyond words, I slid down the ladder, leaving my sobbing mother and weak father behind. I scurried into my old bedroom, tuning out the sound of wood tearing from hinges downstairs. Feet pounded across the lobby. I tore open the bedroom window and eyed the branch of the oak tree a couple of feet away. As the stranger came upstairs and my heart pounded against my ribcage, I took a deep breath. Then, for the first time since my reckless youth, I jumped. A cry of frustration came from behind me as I clumsily caught the thick branch like a monkey bar. After scaling down the tree, I looked up in terror to see that man standing in the window, fingers clutching the edge of the frame. He had been a moment from snatching me. I fled as an ambulance siren filled the street. For the past day, I've been hopping from bus to bus. I haven't slept. I'm too afraid to contact my parents. But now that I've put some distance between myself and that horrifying photograph, which seemed to call out to a frightful force I do not understand, I'm starting to see a little more clearly. Yesterday, I needed only to escape. Now, I need answers. Who am I? And who are the people watching me? Perhaps not the exact demonic being from Christian eschatology, given that my story concerns neither heaven nor hell, neither God nor the devil. Still, I don't know a better word to describe me. Regardless of my cult-specific religious ideology, the fact of the matter remains that I was born with a godless purpose, much like Lucifer himself. I was conceived to bring about the end of mankind. On Tuesday, After a sleepless night and a day of bus hopping from city to city, I eventually wandered into a library, hoping that I'd put enough distance between myself and that home intruder. My chest still fluttered with adrenaline. I'd not felt terror like that since Miss Black nearly stole me from the world as a boy. And I believed my father, that touching the photograph and those documents had been the gateway to those people. I didn't believe in the supernatural until I felt it for myself. A force beyond earthly explanation. I don't know how to describe the sensation, but I felt those people, the ones who made me. I saw them, and they saw me. And I knew I had to do whatever possible to stop them from finding me again. Using a library computer, I reached out on Reddit and other online forums, asking for information as to the identities of these people. I expected it to be difficult to find answers about a cult of, judging by the photograph, only 50 people, but I learned that I was dealing with something bigger than that. This cult is named the Old Collective. It is a community of folk who have long practiced occult rituals, all in the name of saving humanity. Their goal has long been to kill the many and save the few. Not for the sake of preserving the planet, but for building a new status quo, building a dark and brutish wasteland with them and their god of flesh as its ruler. All they have ever needed, to carry out their unholy plan, is a vessel. A vessel to become their god of flesh. And, worst of all, I learned that this cult numbers in the thousands, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of members across the world. This opened up an entirely new compartment of fear in my chest. You see, at first, I imagined that the home intruder had walked through some spectral gateway to reach my location within a matter of mere minutes. The reality, however, was perhaps worse. He'd simply been nearby. This cult is so large, and so pervasive in global civilization, that these monsters are everywhere. You live near these people. They walk among you. In your city, your town, your village. People who want to end you and everything you love. I realized, as I sat in the middle of that library with teary eyes surveying my surroundings fearfully, that there wasn't a bus in the world that could take me away from them. Nowhere was safe. I had to find a way to make myself safe. I eventually stumbled across a private Discord server, titled 11, concerning matters of the occult. The conversation quickly took quite a turn. Me. How do I contact my parents safely? Yell 10. Don't. Me. But I need to find out whether they made it to the hospital. Yell 10. If they're still alive, it's only because the Old Collective has allowed it. Perhaps to draw you back there. Blue man. Yell 10 is right. You cannot trust anybody. These people have spent 20 years searching for you, and they'll never give up. They'll try to bait you somewhere. Don't stay in any one place for too long. Me. My father still didn't fully explain how they found us the first time. Yell 10. Those papers and that photo were spiritual instruments imbued with a spiritual link between you and the Old Collective. One touch allows you to see them and them to see you. It's a bridge of the mind, of the spirit, of the soul. Me. But they won't find me now, right? Without those spiritual instruments? Blue man. You can't outrun this, Adam. Me. Please don't call me that. I'm Charlie. Yell 10. You sound like one of them, Blue man. Blue man. Same right back at you, asshole. Yell 10. Are you keeping safe, Charlie? Me? I'm using a public computer rather than my phone, though I know these people use rituals and old magic to search for me. Blue man. That doesn't mean they can't find you through technology too. I'd leave that library right now if I were you. Another ominous message. I found myself agreeing with Yell 10. It seemed like this blue man almost admired the Old Collective. Then I received a private message. Yell 10. I don't often advocate doxing, but if somebody had the technological wherewithal to uncover the location of, say, a certain blue man, then that somebody might provide you with this. Below this message was the shared Google location, just outside Paris, of a phone belonging to a man whose identity I won't share here. Me. Why the fuck would you give me this? Yell 10. If he's with the Old Collective, and you get the jump on him, you'll get answers. I didn't know how I found agreeing to something so ludicrous, but I got up from the chair in the library, and hurriedly made my way out, head pounding painfully. I also don't know how I so easily convinced myself to pour a hefty chunk of my student loan into a plane ticket, of all things, in the middle of the week. Then again, I had more to fear than missing lectures and assignments. I still wanted to believe the whole ordeal to be in my head, my aching head. Wanted to believe I hadn't seen or felt a thing whilst holding that photograph and those pieces of paper. That there had been no intruder in our home. That Mum and Dad were sitting in a hospital somewhere, wondering why their son had vanished for 24 hours. But I knew better. I felt the prick when I touched that first document, not a paper cut, but some living thing within the paper. And I saw people standing in all parts of the world, watching and smiling at me. It was no dizzy spell that took hold of me. Moreover, when I arrived in Paris late on Tuesday evening, I realized I was making a grave mistake. Yet, that didn't stop me. Didn't convince me to cancel the Uber to Blue Man's apartment building. Didn't convince me to get off the pavement, from which I stood and eyeballed the large, limestone structure, towering 4 stories above me. Didn't convince me to run when the hairs on the back of my neck stood to attention. Then came a brutish hand around my neck, and it clamped firmly against my mouth. I unleashed a terrified screech, pleading for my life, as I was dragged into an alleyway opposite the apartment building. And I decided that this must be it, the terrifying end to my short-lived quest for answers. I sobbed, and shrieked, and begged for mercy in a muffled voice, all while attempting and failing to come to terms with the seeming inevitability of my oncoming demise. "Quiet," hissed my assailant in a French accent. "I will let my hand go, Mr. Charlie, but you must stop, please. I'm not with them. I'm not." My eyes broadened as I realized it was him, Blue Man. I elbowed the man, propelling myself forwards, then spun around with fists raised, and he held his hands up defensively. "You shouldn't have come here," he said in a breathy voice. "They tricked you. They're already in your head. You can feel them squirming around in there, can't you?" I gulped, trying to ignore the pounding sensation in my skull. "Who the fuck are you?" "We have to get away from here," Blue Man pleaded in a whisper. "There's someone in my apartment. 3rd floor. They used me as bait to find you." I looked up at the 3rd floor, following Blue Man's shaky finger to a row of lit windows. Figures walked past the glass panes, searching for the Frenchman who had escaped and, seemingly, waited for me to show. Waited to apprehend me before the old collective could do so. I believed him. Call it my 6th sense. Just like my sense that, as Blue Man had said, these people had wormed their way into my brain. Ever since I touched the things in that box. And the thought of them rummaging around up there, much as they were rummaging through Blue Man's apartment, filled me with deep, unyielding horror. When I snapped back into reality, I realized that I was still staring at the lit windows of Blue Man's apartment, but all movement had stopped behind the glass panes. There were 3 silhouettes standing and looking out at the night. Looking out at us. Blue Man and I jolted on the spot as the lights in the apartment suddenly cut out. "They're coming," he murmured, backing down the alley. "Come on, we've got to go." We both turned to flee, but stopped immediately in our tracks. The dark outlines of heads were visible at the far end of the alley, men and women obstructing our path. "Shit," Blue Man whispered, turning back to the main road. "Okay, we'll go this." The man grabbed hold of my arm, just below the sleeve of my white tee, and unleashed an almighty scream, the most horrific scream I have ever heard. It was something beyond human, for he suffered a pain no human should suffer. And as he recoiled from me, it was my turn to scream in horror, for Blue Man's skin bore cracks that were spreading across his flesh, painting his arms, then his cheeks, and presumably his entire body. And in a swift act of what I choose to see as mercy, all was over in a matter of seconds. Bubbling blood, emitting steam, poured through the wounds, red-hot blood spilling out of a body boiling alive. And then, like a glass cracking from thermal stress, Blue Man's entire form shattered spontaneously, reducing him to a pool of indistinguishable mush on the floor. Since touching the things in that box, something had awoken within me. Something that made me an abomination to the touch. The ender of humanity. I wailed, stumbling into the street, as the horrifying figures from the alley and Blue Man's apartment building began to surround me. I shivered, terrified beyond words, in the center of the road as I prepared to meet my end. And then came a brilliant burst of thought, whether internal or external, I do not care. But as the connection between the old collective and me strengthened, and I had visions of the many thousands of followers across the world, an ingenious idea struck me. An idea struck by the hellish end to which Blue Man had just succumbed. When those people and I were connecting like that, whether in our minds or some spiritual realm, it was almost like touching. Like touching Blue Man. And as I had terrifying visions of those many nightmarish figures across the world, searching for me, intending to use me for awful and unspeakable things, I decided to let them reach out, to let them touch me through that spiritual plane. In fact, I begged them to do so. And they foolishly did. Then came the screams. The screams of those dozens of monsters surrounding me in the street, moments away from getting their greedy mitts on me. I don't know whether they'd even thought about the situation, in their collective delirium, thought about what had just happened to Blue Man. A mere touch of my skin, and his blood had boiled, had poured through opening fissures in his skin. And now the same fate was befalling each of them. It might have befallen others across the world. I don't know how far it reached. All I know is that I felt them reaching out in my mind, and something within me reached back. Something dark that they put inside me. And that is what I fear most. Even now, after fleeing France and putting distance between myself and that awful cult, I realize that I cannot run. Even if I were to end every last cult member on Earth, I wouldn't be killing the true evil that hunts me, has hunted me since my birth. After all, I put an end to them, but not to myself, not to the thing inside me. I have no control over any of this. It was all planned out for me, and I am as much a victim as any of you. I was created to end the world. It's baffling to me that the world keeps turning, oblivious to the hellish week I have just endured. Oblivious to the fact that we all scarcely survived the end of the world. Oblivious to the fact that it may still end. Following the events at the foot of that Parisian apartment, the bloody fragments of Blue Man and the shattered cultists inexplicably turned to ash and were brushed upwards by the breeze. That dusty tempest beat against my skin, sticking those specks of people tightly to my fearful, paralyzed body, a reminder of what I'd done, a reminder of the evil coursing through my veins. Something haunting that possessed me. I knew that I should keep moving, should burn through my meager funds, traveling as far as I could in any direction, so as to not be found again, so as to become someone other than Charlie, someone other than Adam, the harbinger of the apocalypse for whom the old collective was searching. But I didn't have the stomach to truly leave it all behind. I wanted to go home. I felt alone and exposed, felt stalked, as ever, by eyes only human on the surface. At the age of 20, having lived and studied as a university student for 2 years, I had long thought myself to be a grown-up, to be strong and independent. However, facing nightmares beyond myself had unveiled the truth, that I was, beneath it all, still a child. And though I tried, I couldn't help myself. I reverted back to being a boy desperate for his mother and father. So, I did exactly what the old collective expected of me. I took a flight home, and I was very nearly lulled into a false sense of security at Beauvais Airport, by the crowds of everyday people, nattering and chattering about trivial things, but triviality was a coddling blanket, as it tricked me back into my old self, the one who didn't believe in forces higher than ourselves, the one who believed only in the very grounded and very real world we all see with our eyes. It must have been a trauma response to the terrifying things I had seen and endured in Paris. By the time I landed in Manchester, I was blindly eager to see my parents. All thought of danger had fled my mind. All I thought was that they must have been worried sick about me for the past few days. That they may well have been home from the hospital already, sitting at home, awaiting my return. They didn't call, I reminded myself. That might have been a cause for concern, had I been thinking clearly. But when the nurses and doctors at the local hospital told me that no one by the name of my father had been admitted within the past week, I felt a pang of fear. The mental alarm bells startled to toll quietly, clanging in a near inaudible rhythm. Still, I tried my damnedest to ignore my mind, screaming at me to run, and decided, instead, to escalate the matter. I asked to talk to somebody about the ambulance services records, as a vehicle had very clearly been dispatched to my street. I'd heard the siren as I fled. They found a record of my mother's 999 call, found a member of staff who'd been dispatched to the street, but nobody was there, the paramedic explained. We knocked on the door, then tried to access the property, and finally called the fire department to assist. But when we searched your house, we found neither your mother nor father. They may well face legal action for the false call, so. It wasn't a false call, I interrupted breathlessly. They should have been there. They. Weren't you with them? Asked the paramedic. I gulped, then lied. I went out to the shop when Mum called me. Then you waited 2 days to come to the hospital looking for your father? The paramedic asked, eyes narrowing suspiciously. I shook my head then started backing away, not looking to find myself in any sort of trouble. For all I knew, eyes were watching me. The news of my parents' disappearance had woken up something in me, had reminded me of the very present danger encroaching from all sides, suffocating me. I have to find them, I hoarsely croaked, turning on my heel and quickly striding away before the paramedic could probe any deeper into the odd turn of events. I left the building, eyes stinging with a starting set of teardrops. I was moments away from bursting into full-blown bawling, but then I was overcome by a sudden sense of purpose, a sudden idea, to be exact. The old collective had my parents, and I knew how to find them, but I would have to face one of my oldest fears. I took a long taxi ride to Cheshire, and was dropped off at Style Prison, an ominous cluster of buildings, in the sense that they appeared more like haunted houses than the wards of a penitentiary, red-bricked, 2-story buildings with stunted chimneys. Only the sign gave away that I had stumbled not into a residential street but a prison. Welcome to HMP and Yi Style. Building hope. Changing lives. And the inmate I had come to visit was, as I'm sure you've deduced, my old religious education teacher, Miss Black. The woman who attempted to steal me from the world as a child. Has she had many visitors over the past 6 years? I asked. No, the officer bluntly replied. And that was the end of the conversation. The prison officer led me down dimly lit corridors in one of the smaller buildings. I looked out of the windows, but sunshine did nothing to cut through the gloom of the place. I had seen many friendly faces in the prison, inmates and officers alike, but this particular man was the first who seemed cold and distant. I had the strangest feeling that it had something to do with the woman he was taking me to visit. "Might I ask why we won't be talking in the visitor's center?" I asked politely as the man stopped in front of a particular door, shaky fingers around the door handle. "We bend the rules for her," he whispered, voice nearly cracking. "It's better for everyone when she stays in here." As the prison officer unlocked the door, I turned a little pale and barked, "Wait!" He sighed and turned to face me. "What?" I started, shivering. "I don't know about this." And the man simply nodded, as if fully understanding. "Do you want me to lock this door?" I should lock it, then you should go home and never come back here." The prison officer extended his free hand towards me, possibly to comfortingly pat me on the shoulder, but I retreated with wide, fearful eyes, remembering what had happened when Blue Man's skin met mine. I had a horrifying flashback of his body overflowing with piping hot blood, moments before his flesh burst completely. I didn't want to risk touching another person again, didn't want to risk even thinking of another person, as I'd somehow fated the cultist to the same ends by merely letting our minds connect. I realized I had no control of the thing hiding within me. Or, perhaps more terribly, that thing had all of the control. I keep thinking that, perhaps, Adam has always been the real child. As far as I know, I am the being hitching a ride in a demonic creature. Anyhow, the prison officer seemed startled by my fearful, retreating reflex, but he quickly returned his hand to his side. "Why?" I whispered, infected by the man's contagious terror. "Why are you so afraid of her?" He said, "Because bad things happen to people who so much as look at her. Things I don't know how to explain. Deaths, maims, and other nightmares that she couldn't have possibly have caused, but she is somehow always to blame. We all feel it, so we all stay away from her. It's happened time and time again to inmates and officers. They go back to their cells, or homes, then they suffer horrible fates. And it'll happen to you too, kid. So, I'll ask you one more time. Do you want me to lock this door?" I shook my head, and the officer offered me a pitying look, then a head nod. He flung the door open and stepped back, shakily motioning for me to step inside. He mumbled something about me hollering for him if necessary, but there was a pleading tone to his voice. "I beg of you, kid, don't holler for me. Don't make me go in there with her." Miss Black sat on the bottom bunk of her two-person room which, through a series of horrifying supernatural events, she had snagged for herself. Undoubtedly, given the prison officer's story, nobody would want to share a cell with such a haunting woman. There was nothing comforting about seeing her with graying locks of hair, and tired eyes winged with crow's feet. Age had not weakened her in my eyes. If anything, it only afforded greater depths of wisdom and nightmarish power, made her somehow less human in my eyes. "Adam?" Miss Black whispered, meeting my gaze with teary eyes and a jubilant smile. "You came back to me. To us, as foretold." I shuddered in horror at those two final words. I had come there of my own free will, my own volition. I'd been certain of that. But Miss Black made me doubt everything, instilled me with dread greater than even that of my 14-year-old self. I felt lesser than I had on that day, with my schoolmates calling for Mr. Alton to save me. Because I was alone this time. "Where are my parents?" I wheezed. "The defectors?" Miss Black asked. "I have heard stories of them. Heard stories of you. When you were born, we traveled from far and wide, from all corners of the earth, to see you. But I was not blessed to." "Please," I begged. "They're gone, and I need them." "They abandoned you," Miss Black hissed, brows suddenly lowering and gentle demeanor turning dark. It almost felt as if the sun had dimmed beyond her barred glass pane. "They defected from us, and they defected from you. They will pay when the crescent moon comes, when you rise to your fullest." My lips quivered. "Please, you have to know something. Where are they?" The woman smiled. "I am but one of many. Look at me, rotting away in this cage. The old ones have not come to collect me, have they? I don't know why you would imagine that I know a thing about your filthy abductors." "They're my parents," I screamed at the woman, fists clenching and eyes burning, with neither tears nor rage, but something I didn't understand. She smiled widely, and I saw a glint of red in her eyes, but it didn't come from her. It was a reflection of my own scorching pupils. I unclenched my fists and stumbled backwards, moaning in abject fear at whatever I'd just experienced, whatever I'd felt burgeoning within me, threatening to bubble to the surface. I felt the red flit away from my retinas, but it was still there, lurking behind them, lurking deep within me. And no matter how lovingly Miss Black looked at me, I knew that I wasn't the chosen one at all. I was a vessel for something deeper and darker that had been hibernating within me for 20 years. Something on the verge of coming out. Of replacing me. You are so nearly ready, she giggled tearfully. I gulped and turned. I'm leaving now. Wait, she screeched, halting me in my tracks. I'll help you. I'm connected to the old collective. I'm sure they will know what happened to your mother and father. Those last 3 words were practically spat out of Miss Black's mouth, as if they'd tasted sour and poisonous on her tongue. I knew she was fooling me somehow, knew that, given her desperation for me to stay, I should leave even more hurriedly, should be doing whatever possible to not give her what she wanted. But I needed Mum and Dad. I turned and nodded. Please. She smiled. As you will it, Adam. Blessed be. When she opened her mouth, I expected words to come out. Some ritualistic chanting in a foreign language. Something that would summon her fellow cultists to the prison. Instead, however, her mouth kept opening. Wider and wider, in both height and width. And my own lips could only open so far as I screamed at the impossibility before me. Screamed as her lips widened to fill the whole room. Widened and barreled towards me. I banged feverishly on the door, shrieking at the top of my lungs for the prison officer to let me out. But either he'd scarpered from the scene or Miss Black had already swept me away from that world. And then I fell into her blackened maw, shrieking until my vocal cords gave out. Then came blinding white from the black, and when I rubbed my eyes, my vision eventually adjusted to the blazing sun above, to the blue and yellow above, to the green below. I felt grass scratching my skin and sat up, immediately feeling a lurch in my gut. I recognized that place. It was the field from the photograph in my parents' attic. I had returned home. And not spiritually. Not in some vision that Miss Black had cast. She had, impossibly, flung my body from that cell-and-style prison to a distant rural land. The land in which I had been born. The land to which pilgrims of the old collective had fled from across the world to see me. Their chosen one. Their bringer of humanity's end. Charlie! Screamed a voice from behind me. I shot to my feet and spun to see a horrifying sight. Swaying upside down from the upper beam of a wooden structure, shaped like a football goalpost, were my parents, bound by their ankles. And behind them, in a group of 20 or 30, stood members of the old collective. He has returned to us, cried a shrill voice from the crowd. Yes, Sister Black shall be rewarded, came a deeper voice. Run, Charlie, my mum begged a second time. She was silenced by a swift thump to the head with one man's wooden stick. Please, I begged, staggering forwards through the grass, just let my parents go. Your parents? Came a woman's voice from the crowd. And then they emerged, the blonde couple from the photo. Of course, 20 years later, their hair bore quite a few white strands, but they were unmistakably the two who had been holding the baby in the picture. I felt sick. Adam, the man whispered, we have spent 2 decades searching for you. Our boy. Blessed be. Blessed be, his wife blubbered. The two walked, hand in hand, towards me, and I cast my eyes to my true parents, swinging upside down from the wooden beam, not the ones who created me, but the ones who raised me, the ones who saved me from this nightmare. Please, I begged the blonde couple in fear, then I forced out the words, Mum and Dad. I let them embrace me, as terrified as I felt. Their skin didn't crack, and blood didn't spill loose, which only filled me with hellish questions. Why wasn't Blue Man spared the same fate? And what am I? Our son, my biological father whispered into my fear as the pair squeezed me more tightly. I shivered, realizing that our minds were connected, that he could read my every thought and desire. That he knew I was lying. That I didn't see them as mother and father. That I didn't care about the old collective, and I'd burn it all down to save my real parents. What horrified me above all else was that they didn't seem to care. Not a single member of that cult. This only made me fear that they, much like the nightmare dwelling within my body, held all of the cards, held the true power in the scenario. And that I, Charlie, would die as soon as the time had come. As soon as I had become ripe. My biological mother whispered tearfully in my other ear. You are so nearly there, Adam. I'm Charlie, I sniffled. And then their hands dug more deeply into my flesh. I tried to scream, but something held my tongue. That thing within. You are Adam, the blonde man hissed. Charlie is a lie that will die under the crescent moon. Soon, my darling, his wife whispered as the pair pulled away from me. Blessed be. The man sighed, eyeing me softly again. Blessed be. What do I have to do to free them? I asked, watching my teary-eyed parents squirm in their restraints. Who is in charge? My cult mother smiled. The crescent moon. To add emphasis to this answer, my cult father thrust his finger towards my chest, and I looked down, feeling a jolt course across my skin and through my core. I felt it behind my ribcage, the irregularity, the dum, ba-ba dum, dum, ba-ba dum, like the beat of a drum, not a heart. We are not built to be conscious of own organs, our own innards, but my biological father had made me, with the touch of his finger, so horribly, horribly aware of my inner cogs. Of my crescent-shaped heart. There came chest pain, and I looked down to see something pressing through my chest, pressing through the fabric of my shirt. A half-moon outline. I fell to my knees in the grass, hyperventilating as I realized that the members of the old collective weren't waiting for a crescent moon in the sky. The crescent moon was me. The heart within me. The living thing waiting to awaken. Waiting to ripen. Charlie is a lie, the blond man reiterated more softly. You will come to understand that, Adam, when you, like the rest of us, bow to the crescent moon. But we must help you along, boy, for you have been led astray for too many years by these blasphemers. My biological father took a few purposeful strides towards my mother and father swaying in the air. Go to hell, my true dad growled. The blond man chuckled. I'll show you the afterlife of the one true religion, sinner. My biological mother offered me what almost appeared to be empathy. We are sorry for this, Adam. Then the cultist, in one swift motion, drew a blade from his belt and ran it across my father's throat. My mother and I screamed in unison as a river of red ran out of the wound, spilling over my father's spluttering mouth. A moment later, the cultist ran that same blade through the flesh of my mother's throat. I wailed in agony, watching my true parents wriggle in the restraints as the blood drained from their still-alive bodies. But it didn't take long for my father to stop moving. And my mother, desperately trying to mouth some words to me with her dying lips, eventually hung still too. And now, my biological father announced, turning to face me, it is time to drain you, Adam. As the man walked towards me, wielding that blood-stained blade, I felt fear grip every inch of my body. Fear beyond anything primal. Fear existential, as I questioned what would become of me after my throat had been slit and my body had been exsanguinated. Would my body rise again as something else? I clutched my temples and closed my eyes, trying to ignore the fear in my heart as the man's feet squelched against the grass and my horrifying end approached. And then I saw them in my mind's eye. The faces of the cultists standing in that field, watching me from the execution site. Watching my father walk towards me. Within my mind, I reached out and touched them all. It was an act of self-defense, and rage, and sorrow. I kept my eyes closed as the screaming started, but I saw the horror behind closed eyes, saw it through our accursed spiritual connection. The cracking skin fissures, letting blood run free, then the shattering of the bodies one by one. Only my biological mother and father remained, lying in the grass, when I opened my eyes. I towered over them, resisting the urge to let that hate flare in my pupils, the redness that I'd seen reflected in Miss Black's own eyes, but it was too late. As my blonde parents clung to their last moments of life, skin cracking and steaming blood spilling free, they both smiled at me. Blessed be, croaked my mother, with this act, you have prepared yourself for the harvest. She shattered, and my father didn't even flinch, didn't let their smile waver for a second. Ripe, he croaked as his very lips began to fragment, and his body began to fall apart. One more time, Adam. And then I was left standing again in an empty field, accompanied only by a gust of ash in the air and my true parents' pale corpses hanging from a wooden beam. But the true horror survived within my chest, that crescent-shaped abomination, with a life of its own, threatening to break free. Threatening, next time, to connect with every last person on earth, turning them all to ash and leaving me as the last thing alive. One more time, Adam. I understand now. With every tap into that thing within me, I have made it stronger, have brought it closer to fully taking the reins. Mom and Dad were shielding me from myself, hoping I would never unlock that part of me, that I would never become what the old collective had made me to be. I don't know how they woke up, became human again and left the old collective behind, taking me with them. But I have to believe that the same can be achieved by others across the world, for they are many, so many, and that terrifies me. Please, I beg of any members reading this, see sense, stop this nightmare. Don't let that thing take me. Nobody will survive.
Chapter 2. Someone left a human finger on my doormat for my birthday. It was around 8 a.m. when I woke up. I brushed my teeth and walked into the kitchen, where my mom was already waiting, seated, sipping coffee, and watching one of her crazy news shows. As soon as she saw me, she stood up and gave me a tight hug. "Happy birthday, honey." Then she went back to eating her toast, and asking what I thought about some ridiculous conspiracy theory. I didn't reply, just rolled my eyes while pouring myself a mug of coffee. That's when the doorbell rang. I thought it was the party decorations I'd ordered and headed toward the door. Strangely, the delivery person was already gone, even though I had taken no more than 10 seconds to reach the handle. On the porch, lying on the doormat, was a letter envelope, paper, but clearly containing something inside. Curious, I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a small scrap of paper, like a torn-off page, and a slender black object I couldn't immediately identify. I pulled out the note first. In messy handwriting, it read, "Big day today, baby." A chill shot down my spine as I read those words. It sounded a lot like him. Could this be Father? Was all I could think, and for a few seconds I stood there, frozen. No, it can't be, I said aloud, snapping out of it. Then I turned my attention to the object. It didn't look like anything familiar. I gently pulled it out, feeling its softness and inspecting it carefully. But I soon dropped it, and screamed when I realized what it was. A finger. It looked like a pinky. Blackened with rot, nail missing, the smell unbearable. "Do you want to cancel it?" my mother asked as the police officers left our house. "The party, you know." "No, I don't," I replied, slightly annoyed by the question. This was supposed to be the first normal birthday I'd had since we escaped his grasp. I'd invited all my coworkers. The cops said they'd keep an eye out for him. They even gave me their personal numbers, I reassured her, though it didn't seem to help. She sat at the table with her hands covering her mouth, anxious. It reminded me of those nights she used to wait for him to come home after hours at the bar, just to find out what kind of punishment he'd decide to unleash. "Besides," I added, "we don't even know for sure if it's him." "It's him, honey," she said firmly, eyes drifting off as if lost in a flashback. "We may not know whose finger that was, but you know damn well why it's a finger." I saw tears start to form in her eyes and walked over. "Even if it is him," I said, placing my hands gently on her shoulders, "the police will catch him." I don't know if she believed me or not, but she stood up and quietly went to her room. It was almost noon now, and I decided to start setting up our living room for my birthday party later that evening. I did everything while trying to push the incident out of my mind, but a voice kept echoing in my head. Will we ever be free from him? The rest of the afternoon went by smoothly. Snacks and drinks were on point. The tacky decorations I had ordered from Amazon finally arrived. I took a long, hot shower and got dressed to welcome the first guests. My mother had also come out of her room, wearing a long white dress I hadn't seen her in for years. The last time she wore something like that, it hadn't ended well with Dad. My two closest friends were among the first to arrive, and I couldn't resist pulling them aside to explain what was going on. "Oh my God, Maria," one of them gasped, shaken. "Do you think he's watching you or something?" "I don't know," I replied. "But I've been texting the officer all afternoon. They're patrolling the neighborhood. They've been looking for him for a long time now." "But why a finger?" the other asked, intrigued. I didn't answer. I just turned and looked over at my mother, who was seated, chatting with a friend. My friends followed my gaze, and understood immediately. My mother was holding her beer glass with her right hand, and it was missing a finger, her pinky. The first time she tried to leave him, she packed everything in a suitcase while he was at work and we drove away, I began, trying not to let the wave of emotion take over. He found us at some crappy roadside motel and cut her finger off as punishment. My friends, probably not prepared for the intensity of what they'd just heard, went silent, eyes wide in disbelief. "Jonathan should be here with the cake any minute," I said suddenly, shifting tone, taking a sip of wine, trying to steer the mood back toward normalcy. I tried to lighten the atmosphere, chatting with the other guests, refilling drinks, playing upbeat music. I told myself this was my day, and I wouldn't let him take it from me again. Then the doorbell rang. My heart lifted a little. It had to be Jonathan with the cake. But when I opened the door, it wasn't him. It was just another guest, a coworker. "How are you doing, birthday girl?" she said casually, stepping in with a bottle of wine in hand and giving me a kiss on the cheek. "By the way, I found this lying on the ground in front of your door," she said, while handing me a plain envelope. "Thought it might be important." My hands were steady, but inside, everything went cold. I took the envelope, nodding as if it were nothing. It was similar to the last one. It was another ripped piece of paper, the same messy handwriting. Thankfully, no finger this time. The message read, "Your present is coming, baby." I forced a smile for the guests, trying not to alarm anyone. "Excuse me for a moment," I said softly and slipped away to my room. Once inside, I closed the door and grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking as I texted the police officer, asking if someone could check my house now, just to be sure. Then I called Jonathan. He didn't pick up. I called again. Still nothing. Panic began to creep in. He was meant to pick up my birthday cake, and I hadn't heard a word from him all day. Something felt off. A soft knock on the door made me flinch. It was my mom. "You all right?" she asked gently, stepping inside. I nodded, though my trembling hands said otherwise. Without speaking, I handed her the envelope. She read the note inside and went quiet. Her gaze drifted into the distance, her expression hollow. "He'll only stop when I'm dead," she murmured, before breaking down in tears. I rushed to her and held her tight as she wept in my arms. We were interrupted, though, by a voice calling out from the door. "Hey, Maria, the cake is here." I jolted upright. Jonathan must be here. "Let's go, Mom." I hurried out, heart pounding, only to find the guests looking at each other, confused. "We heard the doorbell," one of my friends said. "And we opened it, but there was just this box sitting on the doormat. I guess someone just left it here." At the front door, a cake box was lying there on the floor, white, sealed, with the bakery's logo printed on top. I grabbed it and set it on the kitchen counter, only to feel something wet on my fingers. A drop, thick and dark red. The silence took over the room. I could feel every gaze on me as I carefully untied the bow and opened the box. I felt sick to my stomach, wondering what was inside, but I forced myself to lift the lid. And, as you can imagine, there wasn't a cake. There was a face, a head. Freshly severed, the color still vivid. Eyes closed, mouth slightly open. It was a head I recognized instantly. The one that had haunted our daily lives with fear for so long. My father's. And stapled to his forehead, the same kind of torn paper as before, with the same crooked handwriting. It read, "Happy birthday, Maria."
Chapter 3. I woke up with another man's face.
I woke up with another man's face. My name's Rick, or it used to be. When I woke up one morning, the guy in the mirror wasn't me. I'm not talking about a bad hair day or a weird dream. I mean, the face staring back at me was someone else's, a total stranger. I stumbled into the bathroom half asleep, switched on the light, and there he was, about 5 years older. Short black hair, receding at the temples. Mine was full and dusty brown. A scar on the chin like he'd taken a bottle to the face once. Thick eyebrows. Brown tired eyes. They were supposed to be green. I touched my own cheek. The mirror guy did the same. I blinked. He blinked. I pulled open the medicine cabinet, hoping to find something, anything that would explain this. Pills? Booze? Drugs? Nothing but toothpaste and an old bottle of Tylenol. The panic started hitting, so I yanked a hoodie over my head, pulling the drawstrings tight until my face was basically a shadow, and tiptoed downstairs. Kelsey, my girlfriend, was still asleep in bed. For a second, I thought about waking her, telling her everything. But how the hell do you even start that conversation? A lot of guys have woken up looking like shit, hungover from a bender, shiner from a bar fight, but no boyfriend has ever had to explain wearing another man's face. I grabbed my keys instead, made it halfway across the living room when I heard her scream. "Who the hell are you?" I turned and there she was, frozen at the top of the stairs, clutching a blanket to her chest. "Kelsey, it's me," I said, voice shaking. "It's Rick." Wrong move. She bolted toward the bedroom, shouting about calling the cops. She looked at me like I was some kind of monster. I'll never forget that look. I didn't stick around to see if she made the call, just jumped into my car and floored it out of the driveway. Charging down the road without thinking, out past the gas stations and boarded up strip malls. I pulled into the parking lot of a diner, a 24-hour greasy spoon with flickering neon signs. I needed a place to sit and think. The bell above the door jingled as I walked in. A few heads turned, but quickly went back to their coffees and scrambled eggs. I slid into a booth in the back, pressed against the window. A waitress approached, chewing gum lazily. "What'll it be, hon?" "Just coffee," I muttered. She walked off. I buried my face in my hands. I needed a plan. I needed answers. Should I check myself into a hospital? Go to the police? Hell, maybe just find a motel and lay low until I figured it out. "Hey, there you are." I looked up. A man was standing at the edge of my booth, grinning ear to ear. He was big, beefy, with tattoos running up both arms. His eyes gleamed with something between recognition and excitement. "We've been looking all over for you, man," he said. "You're supposed to be at home." I blinked. "I think you have the wrong person," I said carefully. He laughed. "Come on, Alex. You forget your own name now." Alex, the word hit me like a slap. "Sorry," I said. "I'm a little out of it." He clapped me on the back hard enough to rattle my teeth. "No shit. Come on, let's get you back. Tara's worried sick." Tara, that name meant nothing to me. But right then, I didn't have any better options. And maybe they would help me figure out what the hell had happened. He drove an old Ford pickup, reeking of cigarettes. "Been a rough couple of days, huh?" he said, pulling out of the lot. "Tara said you stopped taking your meds, started talking crazy again." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" I ventured. He shot me a side eye. "You know, about being somebody else, not remembering who you are, all that." My skin crawled. I turned to look out the window. The town blurred past, shuttered stores, peeling billboards, cracked sidewalks. It all felt unfamiliar, like I was dropped in the middle of a movie I hadn't seen from the start. We pulled into a suburban street lined with sagging houses and unkempt lawns. He parked in front of a yellow house with peeling paint and a broken mailbox. "You ready?" he asked. No, but I nodded anyway. Tara was waiting at the door. She was mid-30s with short blonde hair and dark circles under her eyes. She looked at me with a complicated expression: worry, frustration, love. "Thank God," she said, pulling me into a tight hug. I stood stiffly, not knowing how to react. She pulled back, frowning. "Are you okay? You look different." I tried to smile, but it probably looked more like a grimace. "I'm fine," I lied. "Let's get you inside." The house smelled like stale beer and old laundry. The living room was cluttered with toys, dolls and action figures scattered across the floor. A little girl peeked around the corner, clutching a teddy bear. "Hi, Daddy," she whispered. My heart cracked. I didn't know her. I didn't know any of them. But she knew me. Abby, I soon found, was her name. "My daughter." "Hi," I said, as softly as I could, and she ran and hugged my leg. The next few days were a blur. Tara handed me pills every morning. Tiny white ones from a bottle labeled haloperidol. The label said, Alexander Marshall. I swallowed them without arguing. Better to be numb than to feel like I was in the wrong skin. The meds dulled everything. Like living inside a padded room, watching the world through dirty glass. But they didn't erase my memories. I still remembered Kelsey. Our first apartment above the bookstore. The way she used to wear my old hoodie on cold mornings. Her laugh when she got nervous. I remembered being Rick Morrison. And this wasn't my life. Late one night, I woke up thirsty, in bed alone, still half drugged from the pills. As I stumbled toward the kitchen, I caught a glimpse of Tara in the living room. She was kneeling in front of the coffee table, whispering to something small and dark sitting in the center. At first, I thought it was a statue. Some ugly figurine about the size of a football, carved like a man with wings folded over his face, mouthless, knees drawn tight to his chest. Tara rocked back and forth, whispering words I couldn't catch. I blinked hard, trying to focus. When she saw me, she snapped upright, blocking it from view with her body. "You should be sleeping," she said sharply. I mumbled something and stumbled back upstairs. I told myself it was just grief, stress, medication. I told myself I was unreliable, delusional, insane, and had to lean on the people around me to know what was going on. Then it happened. I was on the couch when the news came on. Breaking, car crash off Route 7. I barely looked up, until I heard the name. Richard Morrison, 32, found dead at the scene. My chest locked up. They showed my face on TV, my real face. Found dead in a ditch outside of town. They said I must have lost control. Drunk maybe. No foul play suspected. Something snapped loose inside me. I waited until Tara and Abby were asleep, stole the keys off the kitchen counter, and drove, headlights off, heart in my throat. I had to find Kelsey. Had to make her understand. I went back to my house, waiting out back in the rain. Kelsey arrived, heading inside. I didn't want to break in and scare her again, so I waited until she came out with a cigarette. She stood under the awning, shaking from either the cold or from holding it together too long, fumbling with a lighter. "Kelsey," I said, stepping out from the shadows. She jumped, dropping the cigarette. Her eyes went wide, fear, recognition, confusion all smashed together. "You again," she said, voice trembling. "Why are you here?" "I know how this sounds," I said quickly, "but you have to believe me. I'm Rick." She shook her head, backing toward the door. No, you're sick. You broke into my house. You're crazy." I knew she'd say this and came prepared. "I know about the quarry," I said. "When you were 16, you broke your wrist sneaking in, trying to impress that idiot Jason. You lied and said you slipped on the stairs." She froze. I pressed on. "I know about the birthmark on your hip you hate. I know you hate mint toothpaste and pretended you didn't because I love it. I even told you not to smoke but no you still do when you're stressed. Found that pack of cigarettes 3 months ago, breast pocket of your peacoat with a rip in the lining. But I didn't tell you." Tears welled up in her eyes. "How?" she whispered. "I have no idea," I said. "I saw the news report, but that was my body but I'm here. Somehow. This is me." Kelsey stood there, rain dripping from her light brown hair, staring at me like she was seeing a ghost dot for a long time. Neither of us said anything. Finally, she broke. "Get inside," she whispered, her voice cracking, "before someone sees you." The house was dim and cold. She didn't turn on the lights, just closed the door softly behind us and bolted it. That night, I crashed on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of home, detergent and Kelsey's old perfume. Neither of us slept much. She sat in the armchair across from me, sipping cold coffee. Every few minutes, she'd look at me, studying my face, my gestures, the way I scratched my head or shifted my weight. Looking for pieces of the man she lost. Looking for proof. I didn't blame her. Sometimes I caught myself doing it too. Trying to find myself in this stranger's skin. Over the next few days, we started digging. She pulled out old photo albums. I pointed out things only Rick would know. Places we'd gone, stupid inside jokes scribbled on the back of Polaroids. We went through my old texts and emails. Looked for anything about Alex Marshall. Nothing. No overlaps. No connections. One night we drove out to the crash site, headlights cutting through the misty dark. Route 7 was deserted. The road wound between 2 rocky slopes, guardrails twisted like broken arms. We found the spot easily. A fresh patch of scorched earth, scattered glass glittering in the weeds. The official story said I veered off, hit the ravine, snapped my neck on impact. But standing there, looking down at the wreckage site, it didn't feel like an accident. Kelsey shivered beside me, pulling her jacket tighter. She had told me that since that morning she first saw me as Alex, the Rick that returned home hadn't been acting like himself. He claimed he was out on a morning jog when I intruded, but he was cold, distant, going through the motions. Then a memory clicked into place, sharp, clear. On the way home, I told Kelsey about the figurine. The mouthless thing Tara had been whispering to. The way she tried to hide it when she realized I was watching. Kelsey went still, her hand tightening around her coffee thermos. "Describe it again," she said. I did. She searched on her laptop, using my description to find something. A pagan story older than any religion about a figure called the Mournkin. He fit the description of the figurine to a T. A being that could swap one life for another. But the price was steep. The stolen soul would rot away, memory by memory, until nothing remained. Only the vessel, the body, would survive. Before we could scare each other any further, we decided to call it. Kelsey had made up the guest bedroom for me after the first night, but she didn't want to sleep alone. I told her I could take the floor and she could have the bed as she shook her head and pulled me in, kissing me. She came away, saying it was the strangest thing. She knew I was physically different, but she could feel me in the kiss. It couldn't have been anyone else. We slept together that night and I felt like I was home again. Even if we had a long way to go, I was overwhelmed with the comforting sensation that we would figure it out together. The next morning we were awoken by 3 loud knocks on the front door. Kelsey sat bolt upright, heart hammering like mine. A voice called out from the porch. "Alex, you need to come home." It was Tara's brother, Wesley, the big guy who found me in the diner. And he wasn't alone. Through the blinds, I caught a glimpse of a patrol car. The police. Kelsey grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the back of the house. Out the window, she hissed. We scrambled into the kitchen, wrenching open the tiny window above the sink. I barely fit through, landing hard in the wet grass behind the house. Kelsey tumbled after me. We sprinted into the woods, shoes slipping in the mud. Behind us, I heard the front door crash open, cops bursting inside, then Tara's voice cutting through the morning air. "It's too late," she screamed. I didn't look back. We ran for what felt like hours. Through the trees, down abandoned side roads, across parking lots slicked with rain. Found an old junkyard, busted open a rusted Ford that still had keys tucked behind the visor. We drove with the windows down, soaking wet, breathless. And when we thought we were clear, we pulled into a gas station outside of town. The lot was empty except for one truck. Wesley's truck. By the time we spotted it, he was already standing there, behind my bumper, blocking us into our space, waiting. Kelsey cursed under her breath, restarting the ignition like she was going to run him over. But in the rear view, Wesley held up one hand. Not threatening or angry. Just tired. I opened my door before she could stop me. Maybe I just needed answers. Or maybe I was sick of running. Wesley didn't move, just looked at me, really looked, and said, "I'm not here to drag you back." "Then why are you here?" I asked. "To let you know." "Know what?" I asked. He lit a cigarette with shaking fingers, glanced toward the dark highway. "You were never supposed to survive it." "What is it, exactly?" I asked. "I don't know." He exhaled a cloud of smoke. "All I know is, it trades one life for another. First time Tara did it, it was to a bully of hers in high school. Caused so much chaos, I never thought she'd use it again." "Then why did she?" I asked. "Because you." He paused. "Alex wasn't well. He kept talking about leaving Tara, didn't want to be with her anymore, and he was threatening to take Abby." He paused, then said, "Guess she figured she had a better shot at someone else in his body than no Alex altogether." "Why did you choose me?" I asked. He smiled and shook his head. "It chose you. We had nothing to do with it." In a weird way this made sense. I was a perfect stranger, but I still didn't understand why he was here. What's the point of finding me, telling me all this? I could see regret in his eyes, because it wasn't supposed to go down like this. You were supposed to forget right away. He shook his head. "But she didn't count on you fighting it, on her still loving you, even as someone else." He looked toward Kelsey sitting in the car, watching us, terrified. "You being around her, remembering who you are, that's what's screwing it all up," he said. "It needs you broken, alone. That's how it finishes the job. But you wouldn't lay down. You kept fighting." "Am I safe now?" I asked earnestly. He thought about it. "You bought time. I don't know how much, but use it while you can." He dropped the cigarette, grinding it under his boot. "That's it?" I said. He nodded. "I'm sorry." Then he got back into his truck and drove away, his taillight shrinking into the dark. We fled again, not putting stock in anything he said, knowing it was better to keep running than to let our guard down now. New state, new town, new motel. Night after night, I was just glad to have Kelsey with me and she felt the same. We didn't care where we were as long as we were together. And it felt like maybe we had beaten it, until little things started slipping. First it was small stuff she had told me, things I should have remembered, where we parked the car, what room we were staying in. I brushed these off, everyone forgets sometimes. Then whole conversations were gone like smoke. I couldn't remember what we talked about or ate at dinner. Kelsey was concerned, but kept me calm, hoping for the best despite the growing evidence to the contrary. Finally one night, we stopped at a nameless motel on the edge of town. It was cold, freezing. Kelsey said she was going back inside to grab her scarf. I sat on the curb, smoking, watching the stars blink and shimmer in the dark. The kind of dark that illuminated them all but made everything else impossible to discern. And just then, I swear some of the stars seemed to brighten, forming the shape of something. A new constellation I'd never noticed before. A mouthless figure curled in on itself, wings folded across its face, knees drawn tight to its chest. The door creaked open behind me. Footsteps on gravel. I turned. There was a woman standing there. Mid-30s. Light brown hair, warm but tired eyes, a scarf dangling from her hand. I stared at her as she approached, heart pounding for reasons I didn't understand. "Rick," she said, voice trembling, giving me a look of concern. I stared at her for a long moment. Then I shook my head. "Sorry, ma'am," I said gently, "I think you have me mistaken for someone else." Her eyes pleaded with me. But I didn't know what for. Tears welled up and spilled down her cheeks. I shifted awkwardly, feeling bad. Are you okay? I asked. She shook her head. No. I hesitated, the night pressing down around us. Are you here alone? I asked gently. For a long moment, she just stared at me. Searching for something in my face. Something that wasn't there anymore. Then she nodded.